Hey guys, tonight we're going to peel back the golden veneer of Imperial Rome and discover a truly grim secret. We often picture Roman emperors as all-powerful figures, living lives of unimaginable luxury, commanding vast armies, and indulging in every whim. But what if I told you that being the most powerful man in the world was actually terrible for your health? Truly awful. We're talking about a level of stress, paranoia, and danger that, frankly, you probably wouldn't survive past the first few years. It's a side of imperial power that's far less glorious and much more deadly. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening, drop a comment with your location and what time it is there. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself transported to the opulent halls of the Roman imperial palace on the Palatine Hill, perhaps around 90 CE, during the reign of an emperor like Domitian. The air is thick with the scent of expensive incense, polished marble, and an underlying tension that's almost palpable. You are no longer just an observer. You are the emperor, or at least you're experiencing life from his terrifying perspective. And the first, most pervasive reality you face is the poisoned crown, the constant threat of assassination. Imagine waking up every morning not with thoughts of governing an empire, but with the chilling realization that today could be the day someone tries to kill you. This wasn't a hypothetical fear, it was a grim, daily reality for Roman emperors. From Augustus, who established the Principate, to the final emperors of the West, the throne was a magnet for ambition, conspiracy, and deadly plots. The average reign length for Roman emperors was alarmingly short, often ending violently. Who were these would-be assassins? The threats came from every conceivable direction, turning the imperial court into a viper's nest. First, there were the Praetorian Guard. These elite soldiers, ostensibly the emperor's personal bodyguards, were often his greatest danger. They had the closest access, the weapons, and the power to make or break an emperor. Many emperors, like Caligula, Galba, and Pertinax, met their end at the hands of their own Praetorians, often bribed by ambitious rivals or simply tired of their current ruler. Imagine trying to sleep, knowing that the very men sworn to protect you might be plotting your demise for a hefty sum of silver. Then there were the senators. These powerful, often aristocratic, men might resent the emperor's autocratic rule, yearn for a return to republican ideals, however idealized, or simply covet the emperor's power for themselves. Conspiracies hatched in the Senate were common, often involving elaborate plots and multiple co-conspirators. Think of the assassination of Julius Caesar, or the later plots against Domitian. These were not lone wolves. They were calculated efforts by Rome's most influential citizens. Your own family could be a source of terror. Wives, mothers, sons, nephews, cousins, all could become ruthless rivals for power, particularly within the Julio-Claudian dynasty. The imperial family was a viper's nest of ambition, jealousy, and paranoia, often fueled by accusations of poisoning and intrigue. Livia, Augustus's wife, was rumored to have poisoned various family members to secure the succession for her son Tiberius. Nero likely had his own mother, Agrippina the Younger, murdered. Imagine having to test your food, suspecting your own wife or mother, or seeing your children as potential threats to your throne. It makes Thanksgiving dinner look pretty chill, doesn't it? Finally, there were ambitious generals and provincial governors. With legions at their command and vast territories under their control, a successful general might decide that he deserved the purple cloak. This led to frequent civil wars as various claimants marched on Rome, resulting in battles that often ended with the incumbent emperor's violent overthrow and death. The Year of the Four Emperors. 69. CE is a perfect example of this brutal cycle, where one emperor after another was elevated and then swiftly eliminated by rival factions. Every meal, every handshake, every public appearance was a potential opportunity for an assassin. Your food would be tasted by a specialized servant, your wine poured from a sealed amphora, your path through the palace constantly guarded. You develop a profound paranoia, seeing potential threats in every shadow, every whispered conversation. Trust became a luxury you could rarely afford, even with your closest advisors. A nervous glance, a too long pause, a sudden silence, all could be interpreted as signs of a brewing conspiracy. This constant grinding fear, the ever-present knowledge that a poisoned cup, a hidden dagger, or a sudden ambush awaited you, was a direct assault on your mental and physical health, ensuring that the poisoned crown truly earned its name. It makes modern job stress seem like a relaxing vacation, doesn't it? You've experienced the chilling reality of the poisoned crown, knowing that assassination lurked in every shadow. This constant external threat fed an even more insidious internal one paranoia's grip, sleep's elusive peace. For a Roman emperor, the mental strain of perpetual suspicion was a relentless torment. Turning the luxurious imperial palace into a gilded cage of fear, imagine retreating to your lavish bedchamber after a long day of imperial duties. The room is sumptuously appointed, perhaps with rich tapestries, soft cushions, and the finest silks. But true rest remains agonizingly out of reach. Your mind, accustomed to constantly scanning for threats, continues its frantic patrol even in the dark. Every creak of the ancient palace, every whisper of the wind outside, every distant footstep could be a sign of an approaching assassin or conspirator. You find yourself listening intently, straining to identify sounds, your heart pounding with a nervous rhythm. The very people closest to you become potential threats. Your most trusted advisors, your personal slaves, even your own family members, all are viewed through a lens of profound suspicion. You remember the fate of previous emperors brought down by those closest to them. Caligula was murdered by the Praetorian Guard, his own bodyguards. Domitian was assassinated in his own palace, possibly with the complicity of his wife and freedmen. This knowledge creates an unbearable burden of distrust. How can you sleep soundly when the person bringing you your evening cup of wine might have poisoned it? Or the servant standing guard outside your door might be in league with your enemies? This constant vigilance leads to a profound sense of isolation. Whom can you truly trust? Whom can you confide in the higher you climb? The lonelier the air becomes. Every smile might hide treachery, every compliment a veiled threat. This emotional and intellectual isolation exacerbates the paranoia, trapping you in a cycle of suspicion and self-preservation. You find yourself confiding only in a select, ever-dwindling circle. And even then, doubt can creep in. The Roman historians, like Suetonius and Tacitus, paint vivid, disturbing portraits of emperors consumed by paranoia. Tiberius, in his later years, retreated to Capri, ruling Rome from afar, increasingly suspicious of everyone, resorting to widespread treason trials and executions based on the flimsiest evidence. Domitian allegedly had polished stones installed in his palace walls, so he could see reflections of anyone approaching from behind. Imagine living in such a state, every interaction a potential trap, every gesture analyzed for hidden meaning. It makes your own social anxieties feel like a walk in the park. This relentless mental strain severely impacts your sleep. Insomnia becomes a chronic companion. You might drift off, only to be jolted awake by nightmares of daggers, poisons, or screaming crowds. Your body is physically exhausted, but your mind refuses to shut down, perpetually replaying scenarios of betrayal and attack. This sleep deprivation, in turn, exacerbates the paranoia, creating a vicious cycle that grinds down your mental and physical health. A lack of restorative sleep means your judgment dulls, your temper frays, and your ability to cope with the immense pressures of ruling an empire diminishes. The psychological pressure is immense. You are the embodiment of the Roman Empire, responsible for its vast territories, its legions, its economy. Every major decision rests on your shoulders, and the consequences of failure are catastrophic, not just for the empire, but for your own life. This overwhelming burden of responsibility, coupled with the constant threat of assassination, creates a profound, existential dread. While modern psychology was unknown, Roman physicians and philosophers certainly observed the deteriorating mental states of emperors consumed by power and fear, often attributing it to moral failing rather than psychological strain. Even moments of supposed relaxation or entertainment can become fraught with danger. A banquet might be an opportunity for poisoning. A stroll in the palace gardens could hide an ambush. You can never truly let your guard down. Every encounter, like every seemingly innocent gesture, must be meticulously analyzed for hidden threats. This pervasive paranoia often led to extreme measures. Emperors would conduct widespread purges, executing anyone even remotely suspected of disloyalty, often based on flimsy evidence or outright fabrications. Informers were encouraged, turning trusted relationships into dangerous liabilities. This created a climate of terror not just for the emperor, but for the entire court, perpetuating the very fear that consumed the ruler. It was a self-fulfilling prophecy of distrust and violence. So, as you envision the majestic Roman emperor on his throne, remember the unseen battle raging within his mind. The immense power came at an unbearable cost, a life consumed by paranoia's grip. Where sleep's elusive peace was a luxury rarely afforded. And the palace, for all its splendor, was simply a larger, more elaborate prison of fear. It truly makes you appreciate an uninterrupted night's sleep, doesn't it? You've felt the chilling grip of paranoia and the elusive nature of imperial sleep. Now, let's consider a more insidious threat that affected even the most pampered Roman emperor, his very plate. For all the lavish banquets and exotic delicacies, the imperial diet was often a recipe for disaster, leading to feast and famine diets' deadly balance. A surprising contributor to the emperor's ill health. Imagine yourself seated at a Roman imperial banquet, a spectacle of excess. The tables groan under the weight of countless dishes roasted boar, delicate fish, exotic birds, mountains of bread, and endless platters of rich sauces and sweet pastries. The air is thick with the scent of spices, rich meats, and expensive perfumes. To our modern eyes, it might seem like the ultimate culinary indulgence. Yet this very indulgence, combined with underlying issues, systematically undermined the emperor's health. One of the biggest culprits was overeating and a lack of dietary balance. While Roman dietary ideals sometimes praised moderation, the reality for emperors was often one of continuous feasting. They consumed enormous quantities of rich, fatty meats, often prepared with heavy sauces. Vegetables were present, but often less emphasized. And whole grains, while available, were not always preferred over more refined, less fibrous forms of bread. This constant caloric surplus, coupled with little physical exertion unless they were actively campaigning, led to widespread obesity among many emperors. Imagine the discomfort of carrying excessive weight, the strain on your heart and joints, making even simple movements a chore. Beyond mere quantity, the quality of preparation could also be an issue. Rich, heavy foods, often seasoned with strong spices, could lead to digestive problems. Without modern refrigeration, food spoilage was a constant, subtle threat, leading to bouts of food poisoning. Even slight stomach upsets could be debilitating for someone whose life demanded constant mental acuity. And then there's the sugar. While modern refined sugar was unknown, Roman emperors had access to abundant honey and incredibly sweet, often dried fruits. These were used lavishly in desserts and to sweeten wine. As we've seen with the pharaohs, these natural sugars, combined with rudimentary oral hygiene, would have contributed to widespread dental decay, abscesses, and chronic tooth pain, a constant source of discomfort that even the emperor's personal physicians struggled to alleviate. Imagine trying to enjoy a perfectly prepared honey cake while your molars are throbbing with an untreated cavity. It would take the shine off even the most opulent dessert. But the real, insidious, silent killer lurking in many imperial Roman meals was lead poisoning. This wasn't a malicious plot by an enemy, though that was a constant fear. It was an unwitting consequence of Roman technology and culinary practices. Lead was ubiquitous in Roman society. It was used in plumbing pipes, in cooking vessels, particularly for lining bronze and copper pots to prevent food from reacting with the metal, and, most dangerously, in the production of defrutum or sapa, a popular yet highly concentrated grape syrup used as a sweetener and food preservative. This syrup was made by boiling grape must in lead or lead-lined pots for prolonged periods, causing lead to leach directly into the syrup. The emperor and the elite, who consumed these sweet, preserved foods and drank wine stored in lead-lined vessels more frequently than the common populace, were therefore exposed to chronic, low-level lead poisoning. The symptoms of chronic lead poisoning are insidious abdominal pain colic, constipation, anemia, kidney damage, gout, and, most disturbingly, neurological effects like irritability, tremors, and cognitive decline. Imagine an emperor suffering from severe stomach cramps or experiencing mood swings and irrational behavior, all unknowingly caused by the very foods and drinks he consumed. This could exacerbate paranoia and affect decision-making, further destabilizing his reign. While Roman authors like Vitruvius recognized the dangers of lead in water pipes, the full extent of dietary lead poisoning was not understood until modern times, making it a subject of ongoing historical debate and scientific analysis of skeletal remains. The imperial lifestyle also led to a lack of physical activity. Most emperors, once on the throne, were not actively participating in military campaigns unless absolutely necessary. Their days were filled with administrative duties, public appearances, and banquets, not strenuous exercise. This sedentary lifestyle, combined with overeating and a problematic diet, contributed to a range of health issues, including heart disease, digestive disorders, and general malaise. So, as you envision the opulent banquets of Roman emperors, remember that behind the lavish spread lay a silent threat. The imperial diet, a blend of excessive indulgence and unwitting exposure to toxins, turned the very act of feasting into a slow, insidious form of self-poisoning. For many emperors, their downfall wasn't just due to a conspirator's dagger, but also to feast and famine diet's deadly balance, a truly terrible irony for the rulers of the world. It makes you feel pretty grateful for balanced nutrition advice, but doesn't it? You've discovered the hidden perils lurking on the emperor's dining table. Now, let's consider what happened when illness inevitably struck these powerful figures. For all their wealth and access, Roman emperors faced medical malpractice, ancient cures, modern woes. The limitations of Roman medicine, coupled with the dangers of incompetent or politically motivated physicians, meant that even the best care could be ineffective or worse, outright deadly. Imagine the emperor, racked by fever, gripped by severe abdominal pain, perhaps from that insidious lead poisoning we just discussed, or suffering from a persistent cough. His personal physicians, often Greek-enslaved individuals or freedmen, would be summoned. While some Roman doctors were highly skilled for their era, their understanding of anatomy, physiology, and disease causation was rudimentary by modern standards. There was no concept of germ theory, no antibiotics, no advanced diagnostics like X-rays. Their treatments were often based on theories of humors, ancient texts, or simple observation, leading to practices that could be ineffective, painful, or even actively harmful. One common practice was bloodletting. If an emperor was thought to have an imbalance of humors, too much hot blood contributing to a fever, a physician might cut a vein to release blood. Imagine being already weakened by illness, and then having precious blood drained from your body, further depleting your strength and making you more vulnerable to infection. This practice, believed to restore balance, often exacerbated the patient's condition, especially if the underlying problem was anemia or a severe infection. Another popular but often dangerous method was the use of purges and emetics. If the emperor suffered from digestive issues or was thought to have bad humors in his stomach, he might be given strong laxatives or substances to induce vomiting. While occasionally providing temporary relief, These could lead to severe dehydration and electrolyte imbalance, especially in an already sick individual. Imagine the indignity and discomfort of constant vomiting or diarrhea, forced upon you in the name of a cure. Roman remedies also included a vast array of herbs, plant extracts, and animal products, often mixed into elaborate concoctions. While some might have possessed genuine medicinal properties like willow bark for pain relief, many were inert, based on superstition, or even toxic in improper doses. Imagine being given a strange, bitter draft, made from ingredients like goat dung, lizard blood, or powdered gemstones, with no real understanding of its efficacy, praying it would alleviate your suffering. The line between medicine and magic was often blurred. While Roman medical writers like Celsus and Galen documented sophisticated surgical procedures and herbal remedies, the practical application and true efficacy for common ailments, especially complex internal diseases, remain subjects of significant historical debate. The skills of physicians varied wildly. There was no formal licensing or standardized medical education as we know it. Anyone could set themselves up as a doctor. While emperors likely sought out the most reputable and skilled physicians available, the risk of encountering an incompetent or even outright quack was always present. A misdiagnosis, an incorrect dosage, or an unnecessary procedure could easily lead to a Roman emperor's demise, perhaps hastened by the very hands meant to heal him. And then there was the chilling possibility of deliberate poisoning. In a court rife with intrigue, a physician, or an enslaved attendant working under a physician, could be bribed by conspirators to administer poison disguised as medicine. The symptoms of many slow-acting poisons like arsenic or certain plant extracts could mimic natural illnesses, making it almost impossible to detect foul play in ancient times. Imagine trusting your life to your physician, only for him to be the very instrument of your demise, calmly mixing a lethal dose into your daily tonic. The deaths of several emperors, like Claudius, were widely rumored to have been caused by poison, often with a physician implicated. Even a dedicated imperial physician faced immense pressure. If the emperor recovered, the physician gained immense prestige and reward. If the emperor died, especially unexpectedly, the physician could face severe punishment, even execution, accused of incompetence or treason. This intense pressure could lead to desperate measures, experimental treatments, or a reluctance to admit failure, potentially prolonging an emperor's suffering or hastening his end. So, as you reflect on the powerful Roman emperors, remember that for all their might, they were profoundly vulnerable to the limitations of ancient medicine. Their illnesses, treated with ancient cures that often compounded their modern woes, highlight a disturbing paradox. The most powerful men in the world were often at the mercy of practices that, by our standards, constituted medical malpractice, making their gilded cages even more precarious. It certainly makes you appreciate modern hospitals, doesn't it? You've explored the hidden horrors of the domestic sphere, but if you were an enslaved man in ancient Greece, especially in Athens, there was one particular fate that was considered among the very worst, the mines of misery: death below ground. This was a brutal, often fatal, existence where human beings were literally worked to death, their suffering fueling the very economic engine of Athenian power. Imagine yourself not in a bustling city or a peaceful farm, but deep underground, in the silver mines of Laurion, located about 50 kilometers southeast of Athens. The air is thick with dust and the stench of sweat, human waste, and unventilated rock. The only light comes from flickering oil lamps, casting dancing shadows on the rough-hewn walls, barely illuminating the narrow, suffocating passages. This is where thousands of enslaved men were condemned to spend their short, miserable lives. Your day would begin before dawn, often in shackles. You'd be marched, perhaps through the chilling morning air, to the mine entrance. Once inside, the darkness would press in on you. The work was relentless and terrifying. Your primary task was to extract silver ore from the hard rock. This involved using primitive tools, iron picks, hammers, and chisels. Imagine swinging a heavy pickaxe in a cramped, dark tunnel, the dust filling your lungs with every breath, the constant ringing of metal on rock deafening your ears. Your body would ache perpetually, your muscles screaming in protest with every swing. The conditions were utterly barbaric. The tunnels were often narrow and low, forcing you to work in stooped or crawling positions for hours on end, unable to stand upright. The heat was stifling, rising from the earth itself, mixing with the humidity from your sweat. Ventilation was rudimentary, relying on small shafts or the movement of workers, meaning the air was thick with rock dust, which slowly but surely destroyed your lungs, leading to a slow, agonizing death from silicosis. You'd see men coughing up blood, their breathing ragged, knowing that their fate was sealed. Safety was a foreign concept. Cave-ins were a constant, terrifying threat. Without proper shoring or modern engineering, the unstable rock formations could collapse at any moment, burying dozens of men alive. You'd hear the sudden rumble, the terrifying crack of straining timbers, and then the suffocating rush of earth and rock, knowing that your life could be extinguished in an instant. Accidents were rife: falling rocks, broken tools, limbs crushed by collapsing timbers. A severe injury meant you were a liability, often left to die where you fell, or dragged out to slowly expire from your wounds. While direct archaeological records of mass burial sites, specifically within the mines, are rare due to the nature of the sites, literary accounts from ancient authors like Xenophon describe the Laurian mines as notoriously harsh and deadly. Food was meager, barely enough to sustain the grueling labor. You'd receive a daily ration of coarse grain, perhaps some dried fish or a few olives, just enough to keep you upright. Water was often scarce and contaminated, leading to outbreaks of dysentery and other diseases. These illnesses, coupled with malnutrition, quickly debilitated the workers, making them even more susceptible to accidents and further suffering. Your body would slowly waste away, a skeleton covered in skin. Perpetually hungry and exhausted, the enslaved miners were often housed in barracks directly adjacent to the mine shafts, in equally squalid and unsanitary conditions. Overcrowding, lack of proper sanitation, and communal living meant that diseases spread rapidly. There was no escape from the constant cycle of work, hunger, illness, and the ever-present shadow of death. Sleep offered little respite, disturbed by the cries of the sick, the sounds of suffering, and the gnawing anxiety about the next day's descent into the darkness. The overseers, often free men or privileged enslaved individuals, maintained discipline with extreme brutality. Whips, chains, and other instruments of torture were used to force productivity. Any sign of slowing down, any act of perceived insubordination, would be met with swift and agonizing punishment. The cries of men being beaten would echo through the mine shafts, a chilling reminder of the absolute power wielded by those above ground. The sheer number of enslaved individuals at Lorien was immense. At its peak, perhaps 20,000 to 30,000 enslaved people toiled in these mines, providing the silver that largely funded Athens' naval power, its monumental building projects, and its democratic leisure. This wealth, the very foundation of Athenian glory, was literally dug from the earth on the backs and broken bodies of enslaved men. For these miners, there was little hope of manumission or escape. Their work was considered too valuable, too dangerous, and too essential to the Athenian state. They were expendable tools whose lives were sacrificed for the greater good of the free citizens. They died in the darkness, unmourned and largely unrecorded, their suffering a hidden cost of Athenian prosperity. So, as you admire the gleaming silver coins of ancient Athens or the majestic Parthenon, remember the silent, agonizing suffering that powered their creation. The mines of misery at Lorien were a true hell on earth, a chilling testament to the horrifying depths of ancient Greek slavery, where human beings were treated as less than beasts, their lives consumed by the insatiable appetite for wealth. It truly makes you appreciate fresh air and sunshine, doesn't it? You've navigated the insidious medical treatments and the ever-present threat of poisoning. But even if an emperor managed to avoid these internal threats, the very demands of ruling a vast empire, particularly the military aspects, took an immense physical and mental toll warfares where campaigns and injuries, leading legions and enduring the harsh realities of military life, even from a position of ultimate command, left lasting scars? Imagine yourself as a newly proclaimed emperor, or perhaps an experienced one facing a barbarian invasion on the frontiers. Despite your supreme authority, you are expected, at least periodically, to lead your legions in person. This isn't a comfortable armchair role. It means abandoning the luxuries of the Palatine for the brutal realities of the battlefield. You would ride for days, sometimes weeks, across vast distances, enduring the same dust, heat, or cold as your soldiers, albeit with more comfortable accommodations. The constant travel alone, on horseback or in a bumpy carriage, and it was physically draining, especially for a man accustomed to a sedentary life. Life on campaign was a stark contrast to the palace. Your bedroom might be a tent, your meals simple field rations. You'd be exposed to the elements, sleeping on rough ground, perpetually grimy and exhausted. The lack of proper sanitation in military camps led to outbreaks of disease, just as it did for common soldiers. Dysentery, fevers, and other contagions would sweep through the legions, and even the emperor, despite his personal physicians, was not immune. Imagine trying to make critical strategic decisions while battling a debilitating fever. Your body weakened and your mind clouded. The stress of command was immense. The fate of legions, the security of provinces, and indeed, the very stability of the empire rested on your shoulders. Every strategic decision, every tactical choice carried immense weight. A defeat could mean not only the loss of territory but also civil war, the rebellion of your own troops, and your inevitable downfall and death. This constant mental pressure, the burden of immense responsibility, would wear down even the strongest mind, leading to anxiety, sleep deprivation, and sometimes a descent into paranoia. You'd constantly worry about logistics, morale, and the trustworthiness of your generals, knowing a single misstep could prove fatal. Then there was the very real risk of physical injury in battle. While an emperor wouldn't be on the front lines like a common legionary, he would still be present near the fighting, observing, giving orders, and inspiring his troops. A stray arrow, a javelin, or even a rock from a siege engine could strike him down. Emperors like Trajan and Marcus Aurelius, who actively campaigned, faced these dangers directly. Imagine being a target, exposed to the chaos of combat, knowing that thousands of men around you are fighting and dying. The sounds, the sights, the smells of battle, blood, fear, human waste, wanaku, would be etched into your memory, leaving lasting psychological scars. Even if not directly wounded in battle, the cumulative physical toll of campaigning was severe. Long marches, exposure to harsh weather, inadequate food, and constant stress would lead to chronic pain, exacerbating pre-existing conditions like arthritis or digestive issues. Many emperors returned from campaigns looking gaunt, aged beyond their years, their health irrevocably damaged by the rigors of military life. They might develop chronic coughs from exposure or persistent digestive problems from poor camp food. The lack of proper medical facilities on campaign further compounded the problem. While emperors had personal physicians, these doctors operated in far less sterile and equipped environments than the palace. Complex injuries or severe illnesses were incredibly difficult to treat effectively in the field, often leading to prolonged suffering, complications, or death. A simple broken bone, if not set correctly, could lead to lifelong disability. While some emperors, like Augustus, were known for a rigorous and disciplined lifestyle that included physical activity, the overall trend among emperors was towards a more sedentary and indulgent existence once in power, often exacerbated by the rigors of occasional campaigning. Finally, there was the psychological burden of victory and defeat. A triumphant emperor might revel in the glory, but the immense loss of life, the brutality of conquest, and the logistical nightmare of managing vast territories would still weigh heavily. A defeat, on the other hand, was catastrophic, leading to immense stress, fear of rebellion, and sometimes a complete mental breakdown. The emperor was not just a general, he was the symbol of Roman power, and every military outcome directly impacted his personal well-being. So, as you envision the triumphant Roman emperor leading his legions, remember the unseen costs he bore, Jan. The glory of military command came with the profound burden of warfare's wear, leaving him susceptible to disease, injury, and immense psychological stress. The very act of defending the empire often contributed directly to the emperor's declining health, making the purple cloak a symbol not just of power, but of profound personal sacrifice and misery. It makes you feel pretty grateful for remote work, doesn't it? You've explored the taxing realities of warfare and the internal dangers of diet and medicine. But for Roman emperors and the elite, an invisible, insidious threat permeated their daily lives, slowly poisoning them from within. Lead poisoning, the silent killer. This wasn't a deliberate plot, but an unwitting consequence of Roman technology and lifestyle choices, ironically affecting the wealthiest and most powerful the most. Imagine yourself as a Roman emperor, enjoying your morning meal or a glass of wine. The very water you drink, transported through an impressive network of lead pipes, might be slowly poisoning you. The wine you savor, often sweetened with sapa or defrutum. Grape syrups boiled in lead or lead-lined pots, carries a hidden toxic payload. Lead was ubiquitous in Roman society, used in countless everyday items, but its long-term health effects were largely unknown, making it a truly silent and deadly assassin. Here's where the danger lurked. Water pipes fistulae Roman aqueducts brought fresh water to cities, but the final distribution within homes, especially wealthy ones and public fountains, often relied on lead pipes. While modern research indicates that flowing water forms a protective mineral layer inside pipes, stagnant water or water with certain mineral compositions could still leach significant amounts of lead. Imagine sipping cool water from a tap, oblivious to the insidious metal dissolving within it. Cooking vessels' lead was commonly used to line bronze and copper cooking pots. It was believed to prevent food from reacting with the more corrosive metals and to make cleaning easier. However, acidic foods, like fruit juices or wine, would easily leach lead from these linings directly into the food. Imagine your imperial chef preparing a delectable acidic sauce in a lead-lined pot, inadvertently turning your meal into a slow poison. Wine and food preservation. This was perhaps the most significant source of lead exposure for the elite. As mentioned earlier, sapa and defrutum, the highly prized grape syrups, were produced by boiling grape must in lead or lead-lined containers. The lead gave the syrups a sweeter taste. Lead acetate, sugar of lead, is actually sweet and helped preserve them. These syrups were used extensively to sweeten wine, flavor food, and preserve fruits. The emperor, with his access to the finest and most plentiful of these delicacies, would have had a consistently higher intake of lead. Imagine enjoying your favorite vintage, completely unaware that its sweetness was slowly destroying your body. Cosmetics and medicine's lead was also an ingredient in various Roman cosmetics like white lead for skin lightening and even some rudimentary medicines. While not consumed directly, prolonged skin exposure could still contribute to overall lead absorption. The symptoms of chronic lead poisoning are insidious and often mimic other illnesses, making them difficult to diagnose, especially with ancient medical knowledge. They include gastrointestinal issues, severe abdominal pain, lead colic, constipation, and vomiting. Imagine an emperor suffering from agonizing, unexplained stomach cramps attributed to indigestion or a bad humor, when the true culprit was his daily meal. Neurological problems, irritability, mood swings, memory loss, confusion, tremors, and even madness. Many Roman emperors were described by historians as being prone to irrational behavior, paranoia, which we discussed, and sudden fits of rage. While these could be attributed to the stress of power or inherent personality flaws, chronic lead poisoning could certainly exacerbate or even directly cause such symptoms. Reproductive issues. Lead poisoning can cause infertility, miscarriage, and stillbirths. This might have contributed to the notorious difficulties some imperial dynasties had in producing viable heirs. Gout. This painful joint condition, linked to kidney dysfunction, was surprisingly common among the Roman elite. Lead poisoning can directly damage the kidneys, leading to an accumulation of uric acid and subsequent gout attacks. Imagine an emperor, hobbled by swollen, excruciatingly painful joints, unable to walk without assistance, anemia and general weakness. Lead interferes with red blood cell production, leading to chronic fatigue, pallor, and a general lack of vitality. For the emperor, these symptoms would have been particularly debilitating. A ruler suffering from chronic abdominal pain, cognitive decline, and debilitating joint pain would be less effective, more erratic, and more vulnerable to conspiracies. The very luxuries that symbolized his power were, unwittingly, shortening his life and undermining his reign. While specific analyses of imperial remains are challenging and sometimes debated, studies on broader Roman skeletal populations have consistently found high levels of lead, particularly among the wealthy, strongly supporting the hypothesis of widespread lead poisoning. This silent killer, therefore, represents a grim irony. The Roman Empire, for all its engineering prowess and sophisticated lifestyle, harbored a deadly secret within its everyday practices. The most powerful individuals, those who consumed the most lavishly, were often unknowingly poisoning themselves, making lead poisoning the silent killer that contributed significantly to the ill health and sometimes erratic behavior of Roman emperors. It truly makes you appreciate modern food safety and non-toxic plumbing, doesn't it? You've explored the taxing realities of warfare and the internal dangers of diet and medicine. But even if an emperor managed to avoid these internal threats, the very demands of ruling a vast empire, particularly the military aspects, took an immense physical and mental toll warfare's wear, campaigns and injuries, leading legions and enduring the harsh realities of military life. Even from a position of ultimate command, left lasting scars. Imagine yourself as a newly proclaimed emperor, or perhaps an experienced one facing a barbarian invasion on the frontiers. Despite your supreme authority, you are expected at least periodically to lead your legions in person. This isn't a comfortable armchair role. It means abandoning the luxuries of the Palatine for the brutal realities of the battlefield. You would ride for days, sometimes weeks, across vast distances, enduring the same dust, heat, or cold as your soldiers, albeit with more comfortable accommodations. The constant travel alone on horseback or in a bumpy carriage was physically draining, especially for a man accustomed to a sedentary life. Life on campaign was a stark contrast to the palace. Your bedroom might be a tent, your meals simple field rations. You'd be exposed to the elements, sleeping on rough ground, perpetually grimy and exhausted. The lack of proper sanitation in military camps led to outbreaks of disease. Just as it did for common soldiers, dysentery, fevers, and other contagions would sweep through the legions, and even the emperor, despite his personal physicians, was not immune. Imagine trying to make critical strategic decisions while battling a debilitating fever. Your body weakened and your mind clouded. The stress of command was immense. The fate of legions, the security of provinces, and indeed, the very stability of the empire rested on your shoulders. Every strategic decision, every tactical choice carried immense weight. A defeat could mean not only the loss of territory, but also civil war, the rebellion of your own troops, and your inevitable downfall and death. This constant mental pressure, the burden of immense responsibility, would wear down even the strongest mind, leading to anxiety, sleep deprivation, and sometimes a descent into paranoia. You'd constantly worry about logistics, morale, and the trustworthiness of your generals. knowing a single misstep could prove fatal. Then there was the very real risk of physical injury in battle. While an emperor wouldn't be on the front lines like a common legionary, he would still be present near the fighting, observing, giving orders, and inspiring his troops. A stray arrow, a javelin, or even a rock from a siege engine could strike him down. Emperors like Trajan and Marcus Aurelius, who actively campaigned, faced these dangers directly. Imagine being a target, exposed to the chaos of combat, knowing that thousands of men around you are fighting and dying. The sounds, the sights, the smells of battle, blood, fear, human waste would be etched into your memory, leaving lasting psychological scars. Even if not directly wounded in battle, the cumulative physical toll of campaigning was severe. Long marches, exposure to harsh weather, inadequate food, and constant stress would lead to chronic pain, exacerbating pre-existing conditions like arthritis or digestive issues. Many emperors returned from campaigns looking gaunt, aged beyond their years, their health irrevocably damaged by the rigors of military life. They might develop chronic coughs from exposure or persistent digestive problems from poor camp food. The lack of proper medical facilities on campaign further compounded the problem. While emperors had personal physicians, these doctors operated in far less sterile and equipped environments than the palace. Complex injuries or severe illnesses were incredibly difficult to treat effectively in the field, often leading to prolonged suffering, complications, or death. A simple broken bone, if not set correctly, could lead to lifelong disability. While some emperors, like Augustus, were known for a rigorous and disciplined lifestyle that included physical activity, the overall trend among emperors was towards a more sedentary and indulgent existence once in power, often exacerbated by the rigors of occasional campaigning. Finally, there was the psychological burden of victory and defeat. A triumphant emperor might revel in the glory, but the immense loss of life, the brutality of conquest, and the logistical nightmare of managing vast territories would still weigh heavily. A defeat, on the other hand, was catastrophic, leading to immense stress, fear of rebellion, and sometimes a complete mental breakdown. The emperor was not just a general, he was the symbol of Roman power, and every military outcome directly impacted his personal well-being. So, as you envision the triumphant Roman emperor leading his legions, remember the unseen costs he bore? The glory of military command came with the profound burden of warfare's wear, leaving him susceptible to disease, injury, and immense psychological stress. The very act of defending the empire often contributed directly to the emperor's declining health, making the purple cloak a symbol not just of power, but of profound personal sacrifice and misery. It makes you feel pretty grateful for remote work, doesn't it? You've witnessed the brutalizing effects of warfare and the insidious crawl of lead poisoning. Now, let's consider another factor that silently undermined the health of Roman emperors: the price of power. Hereditary weaknesses. The imperial families, either through their intense intermarriage and the unfortunate transmission of certain genetic predispositions, often found themselves burdened with recurring health issues that no amount of power or privilege could escape. Imagine being born into the imperial family, a scion of the Julio-Claudians, the Flavians, or the Antonines. Your lineage is impeccable, your future seemingly glorious, but woven into your very genetic code might be a susceptibility to certain ailments, a consequence of centuries of intermarriage within the Roman elite, or simply the unfortunate passing down of particular familial traits. This was a biological cost of power, often overlooked in historical narratives that focus on political intrigue. One prominent example, already touched upon, is gout. This painful inflammatory arthritis, often linked to high levels of uric acid, was remarkably common among the Roman aristocracy, and by extension, many emperors. While lead poisoning certainly contributed, there's also evidence of a genetic predisposition in some families. Imagine an emperor, his strategic mind sharp, but his body racked by excruciating pain in his joints, making every step a torment. every meeting a physical ordeal. It certainly puts a damper on a triumphal parade, doesn't it? Then there were various digestive issues, chronic stomach problems, severe constipation, and debilitating bouts of indigestion are frequently mentioned in accounts of imperial health. While diet, as discussed, played a role, some of these conditions might have had a hereditary component, passed down through generations of families sharing similar genetic vulnerabilities. Imagine leading an empire while constantly battling a churning, rebellious stomach, unable to fully focus due to persistent abdominal pain. The Roman practice of intermarriage within the elite families, often for political and social reasons, while strengthening alliances, could inadvertently concentrate certain genetic weaknesses. This was particularly true for the early imperial dynasties, where the pool of suitable marriage partners among the highest nobility was relatively small, leading to repeated unions between closely related families over generations. This practice, common in many aristocracies, could potentially increase the likelihood of inheriting undesirable genetic traits or predispositions to certain diseases. While direct DNA analysis of most Roman imperial remains is not feasible or has not been widely conducted, the observed patterns of recurring illnesses across generations in historical accounts strongly suggest a hereditary component for some ailments. Leading to ongoing academic discussion, consider the case of the Julio-Claudian dynasty. While their reigns were marked by immense power and political intrigue, many members of the family, including emperors like Caligula and Nero, were described by ancient historians as exhibiting erratic behavior, mental instability, and physical frailties. While some of these accounts are certainly colored by bias and political agendas, the sheer consistency of certain types of ailments across the family line suggests something more than just personal excess or stress. Could it have been a combination of inherited predispositions exacerbated by lifestyle and lead poisoning? Even seemingly less severe conditions, like chronic headaches, skin ailments, or recurring fevers, when inherited and persistent, could significantly impact an emperor's daily functioning and decision-making. Imagine the constant irritation of a recurring skin condition, or the dull throb of a headache that never fully dissipates, all while you are expected to oversee a vast empire. These were not just minor discomforts. They were pervasive physical burdens that shaped the lives of those on the throne. The Roman medical system, with its limitations, was largely powerless against these hereditary weaknesses. They could treat symptoms, but they lacked the genetic understanding to identify or prevent the transmission of predispositions. An emperor's best physicians, no matter how skilled, could do little against the inherited weaknesses written into his very DNA. This aspect of imperial health adds another layer of tragic irony to the position of emperor. You could be born with unimaginable power and wealth, capable of commanding legions and building empires, yet utterly powerless against the internal hereditary weaknesses within your own body. Your lineage, the very source of your authority, could also be the source of your silent suffering and eventual demise. It was a cruel twist of fate, a hidden price extracted by the very bloodline that elevated you to the pinnacle of power. So, as you reflect on the powerful Roman emperors, remember that beneath their majestic robes and impressive titles, many were fighting a silent battle against hereditary weaknesses, ailments passed down through generations. The price of power wasn't just the risk of assassination, it was also the biological lottery of birth, making the Roman throne a seat of immense power, but often also a seat of profound and inescapable physical suffering. It makes you grateful for genetic counseling and modern medicine, doesn't it? You've witnessed the constant threat of assassination, the crushing grip of paranoia, the silent ravages of diet and lead poisoning, the wear of warfare, and the insidious burden of hereditary weaknesses. As we conclude our journey into the health of Roman emperors, let's reflect on a throne of thorns, legacy of ill health. The ultimate power in Rome, far from granting invulnerability, often came at a profound, often fatal, cost to one's well-being, painting a far less glamorous picture of imperial life. Imagine looking back at the long line of Roman emperors, from the towering figures of Augustus and Trajan to the more infamous ones like Caligula and Nero. History often focuses on their political achievements, their military conquests, and their personal eccentricities. But beneath these narratives, a more subtle yet pervasive story unfolds the story of their constant battle against illness, pain, and the relentless deterioration of their bodies and minds. The first, and perhaps most tragic, part of this legacy is the short and violent reigns of many emperors. While direct assassination was the most dramatic cause of death, the underlying stress, paranoia, and poor health undoubtedly weakened their bodies and minds, making them more susceptible to both natural illness and the machinations of their enemies. The poisoned crown was not just a metaphor, it was a grim reality that shortened countless imperial lives, denying them the long, peaceful reigns often associated with absolute power. This constant ill health likely contributed to the notorious tyranny and erratic behavior of some emperors. Imagine a ruler suffering from chronic migraines, excruciating gout, or the cognitive decline of lead poisoning, all while burdened with the immense responsibility of empire. Such physical and mental torment could easily exacerbate existing personality flaws, leading to irrational decisions, unpredictable mood swings, and paranoid delusions. The empire often suffered not just from bad policy, but from the physical and mental anguish of its supreme leader. While ancient historians often attributed emperors' cruelties solely to moral depravity, modern medical historical interpretations increasingly suggest that chronic illness, physical pain, and even poisoning could have significantly influenced their behavior and decision-making, though definitive causal links are hard to establish. The emperor's access to the best ancient Roman medicine ironically often contributed to his woes. Primitive treatments like bloodletting, purges, and the unwitting administration of lead-laden concoctions likely did more harm than good, accelerating the decline of already sick individuals. Their wealth couldn't buy them effective cures for the ailments that truly plagued them. It's a stark reminder that even limitless resources are useless without accurate scientific understanding. Furthermore, the imperial lifestyle itself, often characterized by excess and indulgence, became a silent assassin. The lavish banquets, the rich foods, the constant consumption of wine often lead sweetened, and the general lack of regular strenuous physical activity created a breeding ground for chronic diseases like obesity, heart ailments, and digestive disorders. The very symbols of their luxury were, paradoxically, instruments of their demise. The unique pressures of the imperial role, the isolation, the constant vigilance against assassination, the burden of immense responsibility, and the unforgiving public eye created a level of psychological stress that few modern leaders could comprehend. This relentless mental torment contributed to sleep deprivation, anxiety disorders, and sometimes a complete mental breakdown, further impacting their physical health and ability to rule effectively. Finally, the hereditary weaknesses passed down through imperial bloodlines meant that some emperors were fighting a losing battle from birth. Predispositions to gout, digestive problems, or mental instability, compounded by the harsh realities of their reign, ensured that illness was an inescapable part of their destiny. Their lineage, the source of their power, also bequeathed them a legacy of suffering. So, as you reflect on the grandeur and power of the Roman Empire, remember the human cost paid by those who sat on its highest throne. The life of a Roman emperor was not just about limitless power, it was often a profound, often fatal, struggle against a multitude of health threats, both external and internal. The purple cloak of office often came wrapped around a body consumed by disease, pain, and paranoia, truly making it a throne of thorns. It's a sobering thought that the pinnacle of ancient power was often a direct path to profound personal misery. All right, as the last echoes of our journey through the perilous health of Roman emperors fade into the quiet of the night, it's time to gently bring our minds back to the present. You've walked through their opulent palaces, felt the weight of their poisoned crowns, and grappled with the profound ironies of their powerful yet precarious lives. It's a powerful reminder that history, in its quietest corners, often reveals the most poignant truths about the human condition, even for those at the very pinnacle of power. Let the images of assassination plots, constant worries, and lingering illnesses fade away, giving way to the quiet peace that surrounds you. The sense of the palace and the tension of power fade, giving way to the familiar comfort of your own space. Let any lingering thoughts of the thorny throne and the price of power drift away, replaced by a sense of relaxation and peaceful reflection. The struggles and frailties of the ancient emperors now, temporarily, become part of your understanding, enriching your sense of history and the value of health and peace. As your breathing deepens and your body relaxes, know that the stories of the past are always here, waiting patiently to be rediscovered whenever you seek a gentle escape into the depths of time. But now the journey is complete. Rest easy, knowing that another story has been revealed, gently, just for you.